The Bible, the most significant book ever written. Where did it come from? What happened to the original writings? Twin sisters Agnes and Margaret Smith answered these questions through exploration, encounter, and exchange. They discovered the most important book in the world, the oldest complete manuscript of the Bible. On February 8, 1892, twin sisters Agnes and Margaret Smith encountered one of the most valuable biblical discoveries ever found. As scholars, they exchanged information with others, which led them to embark on an exploration where they crossed the Syrian desert, encountering many difficult and dangerous hardships along the way. There, they discovered the Codex, the oldest complete collection of the Old and New Testaments, assembled only 300 years after the lifetime of Jesus. This discovery illuminates the history of the Bible's development as the most accurate preserved manuscript in existence.
Agnes and Margaret were identical twins born in 1843 in Irvine, Scotland. Unfortunately, less than a year after their birth, their mother passed away, leaving them in the care of their father, John Smith, who was a lawyer. He believed in equal education, so he raised the girls, educating them just as much, if not more, than any boy. Under their father's teaching, the Smith sisters developed a love for languages. By their late 20s, they had both speak 14 different languages, including Greek, Arabic, Latin, and Italian. Their father bribed them into learning languages by promising that they could travel to the country of every language they learned. As a result, they had a love for travel and exploration. Eventually, they went to a boarding school in Birkenhead, England, to continue their education and exchange of knowledge.
In 1866, when the sisters were 23 years old, their father, who they loved, died, leaving them more than $1 million. Still having a love for travel, they decided to go on an exploration to Egypt. Being devout in their faith, they also traveled to the Holy Land and visited Jerusalem. They learned, while exploring the areas, the importance of knowing native languages in order to exchange information with local residents. This caused the twins to learn Arabic after returning home.
In 1883, Margaret married James Gibson after 12 years of dating, but he died only 3 years after the marriage. Heartbroken, Margaret needed to distract herself, so the sisters, who always traveled in a pair, went to Cambridge College. There, the sisters participated in Syriac studies, learning Aramaic, and also improved their Arabic, which would become essential. During their stay at Cambridge, Agnes met and married Samuel Lewis, but he, like Margaret's husband, died 3 years later. The sisters, needing emotional support, decided to move from Kilbarchan to London, where a close friend lived. They continued their studies and encountered a man named Rendell Harris, who was a paleographer. He told the twins about a strange cluster of manuscripts he found on an exploration at St. Catherine's Monastery in Sinai that he did not have time to examine. Harris taught the twins how to take pictures and process them so they could photograph the manuscripts and anything else of interest. Ready for adventure and discovery, the sisters decided to go to Sinai and follow in the footsteps of Moses. The sisters left their home in London to go to Sinai in 1892, but getting to St. Catherine's Monastery wouldn't be easy. They encountered many difficulties along their journey. Their boats were invaded by rats, they were nearly robbed several times, and they had difficulties with the camels. Aside from resting on Sundays and taking photos, Agnes and Margaret traveled non-stop through the Syrian desert on camelback. They were guided by people native to the region and had to put their complete trust in them. During their exploration, they encountered many other locals who were fascinated by the sisters' appearances. The twins, however, were fascinated by the incredible landscape, huge cliffs overlooking the sea and African desert, plains of granite and flint, and beautiful oases. Throughout their exploration, they were troubled by many water shortages and occasional disagreements with their travel guides, but after 9 hard days, they finally made it to St. Catherine's Monastery.
On Monday, February 8th, they were able to gain access to and examine the manuscripts, which were written in Aramaic, the language Jesus spoke. They soon realized that they had encountered the earliest version of the four Gospels in the New Testament. Despite their remarkable finding, however, they continued to also encounter hardships. St. Catherine's Monastery was inhabited by monks who disliked European scholars from previous negative encounters. This created difficulty in exchanges between the sisters and monks. With perseverance, though, the twins befriended the monks through mutual tolerance of differences of culture and faith practices. Everything then continued smoothly, and Agnes and Margaret were able to continue their work on transcribing the Codex Sinaiticus. While encountering the Codex, they discovered it was in poor condition. The pages were stuck together and were extremely fragile. Using the equipment they brought, they took over 1,000 pictures of the manuscripts in order to further examine them in Cambridge.
After completing the initial examination of the Codex, the sisters prepared to return home, but getting back would be harder than getting there. Margaret cut her heel when climbing a cliff, and her foot became swollen and infected to the point that she could no longer walk on it. Shortly after, a huge windstorm knocked over the tent, and by morning, everything was buried in sand. The storm also ruined their water stores. The sisters and their guides traveled through the hot desert for days without anything to drink, and became dangerously dehydrated. Fortunately, they stumbled upon an oasis and desperately drank as much of the dirty water as they could. After becoming hydrated, they were able to filter the water and replenish their supply. Despite Margaret's continued injury and all of the difficulties they encountered, the twins' faith remained strong and their spirits were still high.
After about 2 months, they reached Cambridge. The sisters were both exhausted and worn from their exploration, but they continued to work on the manuscripts, which, to their dismay, had been put in out of order. They had to reorder every page. Agnes and Margaret also deciphered that the Codex was written around 360 AD, making the Codex Sinaiticus the oldest full Bible ever found and the oldest large-bound Bible.
The only other manuscripts that compare are the Dead Sea Scrolls, discovered 50 years after the twins' discovery. Unlike the Codex, the scrolls contain only fragments from the Old Testament. Although the scrolls have great significance, the Codex provides an original documentation of the earliest Christian Bible. Between the 4th and 12th centuries, it has records of additions and corrections, making it one of the most corrected manuscripts in existence, showing how the text of the Bible was relayed from generation to generation, down through the ages. Without the Codex, there would still be a tremendous gap in our knowledge of the formation and original text of the Bible. This exchange of information gives us a more accurate understanding of the Bible's writings, the lives and beliefs which have such significant influence on Christian faith.
As Agnes's journal says, we can only hope that this discovery of an early text of God's great message to the world may lead to an increased interest in Syriac studies and to renewed search in Eastern monasteries for further documents which will, like the Apology of Aristides, give us a more intelligent insight into the lives of the first martyrs and confessors. Through Agnes and Margaret Smith's strong desire to explore the world they lived in, their exchange of education, information, and understanding, and their encounter with the Codex, we are now provided with an original biblical text, critical to biblical scholars, unrivaled as a historical treasure, and vital to the faith story of Christians around the world. With the most important biblical discovery ever found, the Codex Sinaiticus, Agnes and Margaret Smith truly made an amazing contribution through their desire to explore, encounter, and exchange.